Dalit, will you write me?
Okay.
Okay, hello everybody. Good to see you all. There are a few here that it's not the first teaching today for them, but it's great to meet here again. Thank you so much for joining us. And like every week, we've just finished a review session. I highly recommend to go through the teaching during the week. It's so beneficial. If you have questions, please do ask them. It helps us all. And thank you all very much. Let's enjoy the teaching. Yeshua, thank you so much for making the effort, for your kindness. We very much appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Sure, of course. All right. Well, thank you for that, Deora. And let's start, as usual, with mindfulness of the breath. Just settle the mind and let go of any disruptive thoughts. And visualize in the space in front of you, Buddha Shakyamuni. Since the enlightened mind is everywhere, it's not unrealistic to think it's there, the Buddha is there. Appearing as a monk, as an emanation of all the enlightened qualities. And inseparable from your Lama. And then surrounding the Buddha are all the great beings who've attained realizations through practicing what the Buddha taught. Especially those of the Nalanda tradition, like Nagarjuna, Ayadeva, Buddhapalita, and so forth. Also think that the Buddha is surrounded by all the masters of Tibet. Filling this space in front of us, these great beings. Inspiring us and serving as refuge. And even if they don't all appear clearly, just feel their presence. And we're also once again surrounded by all sentient beings, quietly seated around us wherever there's some space. Appearing in different forms, yet in terms of the actual nature of their mind, there's no difference to the minds of those beings in the space in front of us. In that their afflictions, their delusions are not in the nature of their mind. And let's also remember that although, like ourselves, they just wish to be happy and not to experience problems, unpleasant experiences, suffering, and so forth, they continuously create the causes for all these unwanted experiences. Out of their ignorance, their misapprehension of reality. And all of them have been at some point extremely close to us. And could potentially be extremely close to us in the future. So let's generate that feeling of closeness right now. Affectionate love that sees their fullest potential, accepts them, with their temporary shortcomings and limitations. And deeply cares for them, is concerned for them, concerned about them from the depth of our heart. And that affectionate love then gives rise to great compassion, which focuses on the predicament they're in right now due to their misperception of reality. The endless sufferings that they experience. And the causes of these sufferings. and wishes for all of them to be completely free from all these unwanted experiences, unwanted states, and their causes. Think, may they be free from the 3 types of sufferings. Suffering of suffering, suffering of change, pervasive compositional suffering. And may I protect them from these types of suffering. May I be able to help them overcome whatever obstructs them from liberation. And that aspiration in the form of great compassion then gives way to the altruistic attitude that is determined to do whatever is necessary and irrespective of how long it takes to work towards helping sentient beings to be free from all their suffering and its causes. And since that is realistically just possible once we become a Buddha ourselves, once we eliminate all our shortcomings first, let's then generate deep aspiration to become completely enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. Try to really feel this from the depth of your heart, the sincere wish to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. And think that it's also with this goal, with this objective, I will continue to study Chandrakirti's entering into the middle way. Starting, preceded by first taking refuge and again deepening our mind of enlightenment. Dalit. Okay, thank you. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. by the accumulation of merits, practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And then further deepen your love, your compassion for all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And once again, focus on the Buddha surrounded by the great masters of India, Tibet, and so forth. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time. And rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence. And turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of others to the great enlightenment. Okay. All right, now for this coming week, we finally got to bodhicitta, the Mind of Enlightenment. We took our time to go through the different steps, and hopefully, with a little bit of explanation, it's become clear. And it was when we just went through the meditation as part of the beginning of each session. And let's focus on that specifically, especially at these difficult times with the war going on and with so many problems all around us. Conflict, disease, and so forth. So to specifically focus on the Mind of Enlightenment. And as you've been doing, I hope in the past, a year and a half, almost 2 years now, continue generating this mind over and over again. But try not to just go through the motions, like make it such that it's just automatic, but really try to feel it every time you generate this mind. Once again, like I mentioned this before and talked about the beginner's mind, this mind, like as if you were to do it for the first time with the same kind of enthusiasm, with the same kind of strength, and just keep continuing. So this is for this week, for this coming week. And then I'd like to continue with explaining the 37 Factors of Enlightenment. We've gone through some of them. As you notice, I've kind of briefly stopped the text. I'm not going to continue with the text just for you to understand them. So of the 37, they're presented in a certain order, and it becomes obvious, well, it becomes clear once we go through what's explained in here. And what's explained in here really is just a translation of what Geshe says, what Lama Tsongkhapa says, as like a root, kind of the main explanation on this, of course, in the different monastic institutions. Then there are more specific explanations on all of those. But for the sake of understanding these 37 aspects or factors, I think it's enough to just have this. So first, as we've heard last time, there are the 4 applications of mindfulness, mindfulness of the body, and so forth. Application of mindfulness to the body. So it's not just mindfulness, but this application, close application to mindfulness. Of course, in a debate setting, you could argue, is that the same as mindfulness? Is it not? In the different traditions, mindfulness, of course, is also explained slightly differently. In some traditions, it's more of an observing type of mind. Here, it observes, it focuses on, for instance, the body, but then examines, well, through observation or through just conceptually going through these different specific or general characteristics, but it examines them, their common or uncommon characteristics, or specific and general characteristics. So just getting a better understanding of body, feeling, mind, phenomena. And as we've heard, this is done specifically in relation to the Four Noble Truth. So with regard to the body, true suffering, understanding true suffering, mainly based on mindfulness of the body, true origin, mainly with regard to feeling, the true cessation, mainly with regard to mindfulness, applying mindfulness to the mind, and then applying mindfulness to the body refers to phenomena, refers to true path. And we also heard why it's applied that way, or why the body comes first. Body is seen as a vessel of the self. Feelings are that which is enjoyed by the self. The mind is the entity that is, if at all, seen as the main factor of the self or the self itself. And phenomena are the basis of the thoroughly afflicted self and a completely pure self. Well, the mind being the self, this is actually from the point of view of the Svatantrika Madhyamika. So they would actually say that the mental consciousness is the self. The Prasangika school, of course, wouldn't explain this, wouldn't say this. Why? Because the mental consciousness may be one of the main aggregates, but the self is still just merely labeled on the basis of the mental consciousness and the other aggregates. So the explanation here, the 37 factors of enlightenment, this is actually part of the 4th chapter of the Abhisamaya Alamkara, or Maitreya's ornament for clear realizations. So in the fourth chapter, those 37 are extensively explained, and Maitreya's Abhisamaya Alamkara and the commentaries on that, they are usually explained from the point of view of the Svatantrika Madhyamika school, which is why here the mind is explained to be the self. But of course, also ordinary beings may actually see, if any of the aggregates may consider to be really the mental aggregate to be the self, because that defines us much more than the body does. All right, and then the 4 types of mindfulness, they explained from the point of view of the path of accumulation, the lowest level of the 5 path to Buddhahood. First is the path of accumulation, and that can be subdivided into small, middling, and great. Small, middling, and great path of accumulation. If you scroll up a little bit further, then up a little bit up. Great, there it is. So the reason for observing, from the small path of accumulation onwards, bodhisattvas meditate on the 4 applications of mindfulness. Of course, they meditate on them before, but what is interesting in the way these 37 are described or are set forth is that mindfulness is the basis, is the foundation. And that's important because, well, oftentimes it's understood that according to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, well, there's not much emphasis on mindfulness, but actually there is. It is not explained as extensively as it may be in other traditions, but then it is explained in other traditions, which are the foundation for the tradition, the Nalanda tradition or the Sanskrit tradition that is prevalent in Tibetan Buddhism. That is the main tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. So it's explained in other traditions, so we can rely on those explanations. Plus, it's not as difficult as something as selflessness, which requires a lot of explanation. And to a certain degree, it's like you receive the explanation and then you just do it. And you learn by doing. You get a better understanding of what mindfulness is. Anyway, so here it's explained to be the basis. We start our practice with mindfulness. And I think this is significant in that, well, mindfulness should really, in terms of our own personal practice, it should be the basis as well. The body, our feelings, and so forth. All right. And then there's this explanation at the very end of explaining these 4 types of mindfulness, or 4 foundations of mindfulness. There are many purposes for positing the applications of mindfulness here. The main purpose is to understand that the 37 factors of enlightenment arise in the continuum of bodhisattvas. So they're posited here from the point of view of the lowest level of the path of accumulation. So first, when you enter the path of accumulation, when you generate bodhicitta, mind of enlightenment, the aspiration to become enlightened, which is, well, without the aspiration, you're not even moving closer towards enlightenment. So the door, the gateway to entering the Mahayana path is the aspiration to become enlightened. And with this, once you have bodhicitta, once you've developed the mind of enlightenment, then you automatically have entered, by definition, you have entered the Mahayana path of accumulation, and of the 3 levels, the lowest level, the small path of accumulation. And here the 4 applications of mindfulness, or the 4 foundations of mindfulness, are explained from the point of view of this lowest level, because we need to understand the 37 factors of enlightenment also arise at the continuum of bodhisattvas, not just in the continuum of a hera or a solitary realizer. That's the first reason why it's described from the point of view of the path of accumulation, and to understand that if the different classes of spiritual realizations are divided with regard to the person on which they're mainly based, they actually mainly belong in the class of hera realizations. Hera as in like, well, the path or the practices that are mainly pursued by a person who wants to become liberated. So the Hinayana, I don't want to use that word, but the practices of the Pali tradition. So to understand that, actually, they're pointed out as practice. Of course, the Bodhisattva needs to go through them. However, they mainly pertain to a person of the Pali tradition, a practitioner of the Pali tradition. And to understand that Bodhisattvas meditate on the 37 factors that are concordant with the 37 factors of hearers. And that upon completion of that meditation, the 37 factors become the omniscient mind of a Buddha. So it's not just that these 37 factors are found in the continuum of a hearer or solitary realizer, but they're also found in the continuum of a Buddha. Here, just here, as I mentioned, but solitary realizers, are implied. Therefore, these 37 factors eventually become, these qualities enhance further, and they become the omniscient mind of a Buddha. So you have, in other words, you have mindfulness in the continuum of a Buddha, and its continuum, early on, it was found in the continuum of a beginner of practice, then a bodhisattva, and eventually in the continuum of a Buddha. And so to realize thereby that an omniscient mind has aspects that are similar to those of hearers. So the emphasis on this is explained in the 4th chapter, where this is described, that there are certain qualities that we find in hearers, but you also find them in the continuum of the Buddha. All right, that's the first one. We went through this. Then last time, but just because they're so important, I decided to briefly go over it again. And then there are the 4 right abandonments. Right abandonment, actually, there are actually just two abandonments, in that right abandonment that abandons a non-virtue that has arisen, and right abandonment that does not give rise. It's not really an abandoning, but not giving rise to a non-virtue that's not yet arisen, whereas the rest is not so much an abandonment, but it's still called that. So kind of abandoning, as in like eliminating, or well, at least temporarily overcoming non-virtue that has already arisen. So really the first one is an actual overcoming or abandoning, or at least reducing. But anyway, that's just what they're called. And they refer to a mental factor of effort, which means was the enthusiastic effort. That's what's usually called. So this taking delight, actually the Tibetan word doesn't have that enthusiasm as part of the name, but the definition is usually given as well, taking delight, joyfully engaging in this practice. So joyfully overcoming non-virtue that has arisen, joyfully not giving rise to non-virtue that's not yet arisen. So it makes perfect sense that once you generated some mindfulness, well then, based on that, follows the practice of the 4 right abandonments. And then Gyaltsab also explained, well, the reason for presenting these 8, so first the 4 applications of mindfulness, and then the 4 right abandonments, is in this particular order, is that now one needs to give rise to a type of effort that takes delight in averting what is to be abandoned and in adopting what is an antidote. So this is what Buddhist practice is really all about. First, of course, mindfulness, getting to know body better, our thoughts better, and so forth. So mindfulness as the foundation. And here in this case, combined with the aspiration to become fully enlightened, so that these practices become a cause for enlightenment, although they're also found as practices that are necessary to become self-liberated. But here in this case, the foundation are the 4 applications of mindfulness. And then based on that, you start your practice, or, well, you don't start as a bodhisattva, but it's just seen from that perspective. So then you make an extra effort, avoid what is to be avoided, and cultivate what needs to be cultivated. And then it goes on to say that there are 4 kinds. And again, it describes them. We already briefly went through them, so no need to describe them again. And in the sutra, it is said, here it says that in order to abandon non-virtuous phenomena that have arisen, to not give rise to non-virtuous phenomena that have not yet arisen, and so forth, we need to cultivate certain qualities: aspiration, endeavor, making efforts, correct perception by the mind, and firmly settling the mind. And those are then explained, but really they all refer to a certain type of concentration. So mindfulness, very important. Mindfulness is not the same. First of all, I said it today when I gave another class, but I'll repeat it here again, just in case you were not there. So mindfulness is not the same as training in mindfulness. Mindfulness is just a quality of the mind that is there. It's a function of the mind that we all have, but it needs to be enhanced. That mindfulness needs to be enhanced. And it's also not the same as, so meditation on mindfulness is not the same as meditation on concentration. Because meditation on concentration, the goal is really just to keep the mind focused. Keep the mind focused on one object. Mindfulness also applies that. Also focuses on a particular object, but then it becomes aware of when the mind moves away from that object, it puts it back, it places it back onto the object. And in this here in this case, well, it also applies there's also analysis and examination. So bringing the mind back to the body, bringing it back to the mind, etc., and understanding the different characteristics, like examining the different characteristics to a certain degree every time. Yeah, well, no, it's less about watching your thoughts and so forth when you watch the body. It's not really about that. It's more observing the body if that's the focus, bringing it back to the body if it's disrupted, and then examining it, learning more about the body in that process. But that is just the basis, and then concentration needs to be developed. And this is much more part of these 4 abandonments here. You see that when it talks about, for instance, aspiration. Well, aspiration as a foundation of effort. Okay, so aspiration, it precedes effort. The aspiration, it's this way of saying the wish, we aspire to do something. We're inspired to aspire towards something. We wish to do so. The wish to do something always has to precede any kind of endeavor, any kind of practice, if you like. And here the endeavor is described to be the effort that mentally takes up the attributes of calm abiding, correct perception, and equanimity. So those all relate to concentration. Calm abiding obviously does, and also correct perception and equanimity. They're explained later on. So endeavor is really the endeavor to making a special effort in those. And then there's effort, again, generating the antidotes to concentration, which are laxity and excitement. And then lastly, you have correct perception and settling the mind. So they were also mentioned as part of those cultivating aspiration, endeavor, making efforts. So here, correct perception by the mind. When laxity arises, well, you apply correct perception. When you're sluggish, when your mind is sluggish, well, to look at reality, there are these incredible beings, the Buddha and so forth, the correct perception of the qualities we can all attain. And that motivates us, that gives us, that excites, well, not excites us, but it gives us this energy to continue on and have more clarity of mind. If, on the other hand, there's too much excitement, then it's important to settle the mind, settle as in bringing it down a little bit so that it's less excited, and instead we're able to continue. So to settle it based on the understanding, well, yes, we will become enlightened, but still we will die one day. There's suffering and so forth. So that a sense of awareness arises. We're not too excited. And that helps the scattered mind to kind of go back inside, gather back inside. It's a really nice expression, like the scattered mind. Our mind is like these thoughts going from here to there. So excitement really means when we try to focus, if our mind is just sluggish, of course, if it's like no energy and so forth, well, we need to bring it up a little bit, and that makes sense. But then if we do too much of it, our mind gets overexcited. I think that's probably our main problem anyway. We're mostly, just before we fall asleep, we may get really sluggish, but most of the time we're just overexcited. So we need to gather it back inside and settle it on a focal object. Anyway, here it says right abandonment is presented as arising on the middling path of accumulation. This is in order to lead to the understanding that on that level, abandonment attains a special strength, and that the right abandonment presented here is the result of meditating on the application of mindfulness. Okay, so it's not necessarily the case in general that you first need to have mindfulness and then right abandonment. You can also practice them together, but it's the order in which they're shown here. And then the next are the 4 supports of miraculous abilities. It's concentration, big time. So previously, it's like focusing the mind more by avoiding that which is to be avoided and by increasing that which is to be increased, if you like. So, of course, also in terms of mindfulness, we've already heard settling the mind to a certain degree, bringing it back to its object again and again, but also examining the object. Then the 4 abandonments are more, well, they move more towards the direction of focus, of concentration, working with calm abiding and so forth. And then you have the 4 supports of miraculous abilities. It's the 4 legs of miraculous abilities. Now, it's not about miraculous abilities themselves. It's more talking about the foundation, the legs that carry something. So a support. It sounds funny to say the legs of miraculous abilities. So sometimes the Gangbao, the Gangbao or legs that are described here is translated as support of miraculous abilities. Now, what are these miraculous abilities? Miraculous only in comparison to those who don't have them, like, I don't know, supernatural abilities that most people don't have. And we all have the ability to develop them. Our mind has the ability, well, basically to know anything. Miraculous abilities are usually associated with higher awareness, knowing things that other people ordinarily don't know, but utilizing them for the benefit of others, of course. It's not just for the sake of knowing, I don't know, the future of another person, knowing what they need to watch out for, being able to perceive other beings who are far away and so forth. And that's also a miraculous ability, not just this knowledge aspect, but also manifesting in certain ways, manifesting things for the benefit of others that other people can't manifest. So, of course, a Buddha's abilities, miraculous abilities, there are miraculous abilities of non-Buddhas, of non-enlightened beings. There are special awarenesses, like I said, special understandings of certain things. There are also emanations, like special abilities that non-enlightened beings have. They can manifest certain things for the benefit of others, manifest possibly food when there isn't any, water when there is none. They can actually use their mind in such a way that they manifest them through an incredible level of concentration. And the Buddhas are the best in that. This is really what Buddhas do. On one hand, they are all-knowing, so they have the ability of the miraculous ability of knowing anything. And on the other hand, they manifest, based on that, they manifest in different ways and teach. So those are the enlightened miraculous abilities. But for that, you need concentration. So concentration here, the mental factor of concentration, which has 8 qualities. 8 formative qualities, abandoning the 5 faults. And it's again about concentration, but it's previously, definitely it's similar to the explanation of the 3 higher trainings. In order to generate concentration, we need morality, we need ethical discipline. So the 4 abandonments are a bit like these, it's like this ethical discipline, in that to settle our mind, to calm our mind enough, we need to avoid harmful actions and replace these harmful actions with beneficial ones. It's just how our mind works. Our mind is very unsettled when there are harmful thoughts, when there are afflictive emotions. What the afflictive emotions right away do is they unsettle our mind. We're no longer calm, which is why it makes sense. The 4 abandonments are kind of a preparation for more concentration. Concentration we need in order for that concentration, then combined with the insight into emptiness as a union of calm abiding and special insight, to become a tool to removing whatever is in the way to becoming fully enlightened. So therefore, in a way, mindfulness as the foundation, the 4 abandonment as kind of the training in ethical discipline to a certain degree to avoid harmful actions, and now the actual concentration itself. And there's certain qualities: aspiration, exertion, faith, pliancy, which are explained on the next page. They are the direct antidotes to, or not direct antidotes, but antidotes to the 5 faults. Laziness. I mean, I think it's not just a fault to practicing calm abiding, it's a fault to most of our practices. I mean, we're lazy. That's one of the main obstacles to practicing the Dharma. We don't want to. I'll do it later. I'll do it tomorrow, or I do it my next life, and so forth. So laziness here, and these four applications, or the 4, what are they called? The 4, forgot already what they're called, formatives. So they're called, the formatives. I don't know where I got that word from, but the 8 formatives. Anyway, first of all, the 5 faults. So laziness. Where is it? The 4 supports of the reason for explaining them after the 4 is that once more. Okay. No. If you can scroll down a little bit, thank you. So here it says, next comes the path that completely devote themselves to concentration. So Gyaltsabje explains it. The 4 supports of miraculous abilities. So the foundation of being able to miraculously do this, that, and the other. For that, we need concentration. And why are they explained after explaining the 4 right abandonments? Well, once we possess effort, taking delight in averting what is to be abandoned and in adopting what is an antidote, one needs to make the mind serviceable through concentration. Yes, very important. Our mind right now is not at all serviceable. It's all over the place, in other words. So the supports of these miraculous abilities are 4 types. Okay. And all of them are endowed or connected with the 8 formatives, these qualities, eliminating the 5 faults. So number 1, it connects one-pointedly with the object of meditation, independence on aspirational concentration. So here you have the aspect of aspirational concentration, inspiring to be focused. The next is, again, connects one-pointedly with the object of meditation, independence on effort. So the mental factor of effort, joyous effort, is kind of dominant in the second case. And then the last one is a quality that is acquired at birth. It's not something we generate in this life, but it's, again, being one-pointedly connected with the object of meditation. So focusing on an object of meditation while reflecting on something, but a reflective kind of concentration that is acquired at birth, that is not learned from someone, that we innately have from a previous life, having trained in that way. And then the 4th one is also, again, that analytical kind of concentration. So we don't think of concentration as analytical, reflective, or analytical in any way. But of course, our concentration right now, if we were to analyze and be focused, we wouldn't manage to remain focused. However, as we strengthen our concentration, our mind can become so focused that at the same time, while being very focused and very still, it can still engage in slightly subtler analysis. We've all heard the example probably, or the analogy of a fish, like a very still lake. Our mind is like a very still lake with the tiny fish moving underneath the surface without disturbing the surface. So the surface and the calmness, the concentration of the mind remains. Okay. So here, the first one is associated with of the four types of legs, or 4 types of supports. It's associated with aspiration, this aspirational, like wishful kind of concentration. The second is effort. And the last 2 are reflective types. They're like analytical types. One where we're born with it because of what we've done in the past. And then the second, it's due to the Dharma we've been taught by others. All right. So it's definitely moving in that direction of bringing together concentration and insight into emptiness. All right. So I apologize. This has not been much subject of this text. And so for some of you, this may be new, this whole idea of the path, the different stages, like the path of accumulation, etc. So I'm just explaining it on the basis of someone having some understanding of that. I hope this is the case for all of you. Path of accumulation, path of meditation, path of preparation, and so forth. Anyway, can't go into all the details on it, but yeah, hopefully you understand that concentration is important to then, as I said before, unify, bring together this mind of calm abiding together with insight into reality or into emptiness. And the four formatives, they are aspiration, exertion, faith, etc. So applying those to the five folds, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, laziness impedes meditation. Now we may go, oh, this is so advanced, it's got nothing to do with me, but this is also important to us even right now. I mean, laziness is a problem. So what do we need? Well, the first antidote is exertion, to exert ourselves. That makes sense. But why would we exert ourselves? First, we need to have aspiration. So aspiration, I really want to really make an effort. I would want to, I want to. And what is the cause of wanting to? It's faith. Faith in what? That it makes sense, that I can achieve something. I mean, I don't know right now. Until I've achieved this, I don't know. It's faith. I take it on faith. It's not blind faith. It's faith based on a certain understanding that we can achieve this, then I can attain this state. So these are important at any stage, this exertion, which can only happen once we have the wish to exert ourselves. And that can only arise when there's faith first, faith that this is worthwhile. I believe it's worthwhile. I don't know 100%. I don't know it's possible to become a Buddha. I believe it's possible. I believe these practices. I mean, even scientific findings on practicing the Dharma, for instance, I'm not a scientist. I just believe this. It makes perfect sense. I've understood the mechanics. I understood what they tell me, understood the information, and now I believe it's true. So I'm inspired to do this, exert myself. Well, aspire first to do this, and then I exert myself. And the result, of course, is pliancy. If you really make an effort to overcome this laziness, in particular laziness when it comes to concentration, your mind becomes more flexible, more pliant, more flexible. So that way, that helps us to overcome laziness. All right. Another fold is forgetting the instructions when meditating on concentration, right? Forget what I wanted to focus on. So mindfulness brings the mind back. Okay. Then there are laxity and excitement. There are folds that when one engages in the actual practice. So mindfulness is their main antidote. We need to check on laxity or excitement. That is where introspection. So need to apply introspection. What is it? What is my mind doing? Is it laxity or is it excitement? That's my problem. Am I too sluggish or am I too excited? And we need to apply an antidote. But when we apply the antidote too strongly, if there's no sluggishness, but we apply the antidote to sluggishness, we need to be able to let go and therefore apply equanimity. So equanimity is needed. Anyway, it's not that difficult to understand, but this is the basis. This is the basic explanation we find in the scripture. So based on that, we get a better understanding of the four kinds of legs of miraculous abilities. Okay. All right. So then the five powers. Now, what I need to say before that. So this is in order to understand that these three groups of paths, so the application of mindfulness, the right abandonments, and the supports of miraculous abilities, they enhance one another. The supports of miraculous abilities are presented as arising on the great path of accumulation. They can arise even before that and after that, but here they're presented in that order. We should also understand that they arise on the small path of accumulation, But like I said, they're presented in the specific order where one supports the other. And then you have the 5 powers. The 5 powers, they are associated with the path of preparation here. When you've already have that deep level of concentration, you brought it together with your understanding of emptiness, of selflessness, you've brought the two together in the form of the union of calm abiding and special insight. Now you really got the still lake, the mind that can analyze emptiness while at the same time remain very focused. Conceptually, not a direct experience yet, but nonetheless. So you have 5 powers, 5 powers. Power that is faith, effort, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. But now a more advanced version of those. So it consists of any of the 5 mental factors as just described. And they independently cultivate an Arya path and is attained from the heat level of the path of preparation. And it's actually explained that while they're active, the opposite, the counterforce of those, so non-faith, non-effort, non-mindfulness, non-concentration, non-wisdom, they cannot arise when they're active. But when they're not active, when none of those are active, the practitioner's just doing something else, when they're not active, then non-faith, non-effort, and so forth, like the opposites of those, they can arise. So they're just powers. They're not strength yet. When the 5 strength arise, then those faith, effort, mindfulness, and so forth have become so strong that even when the practitioner is no longer practicing faith, effort, and so forth, as described here, even if this practice is not there, still they cannot arise. The opposite force can no longer arise. Okay, anyway. So why are they presented here as part of the heat and peak level? So the 4 levels of the path of preparation, the 3 levels of the path of accumulation we already heard. Now there are 4 levels of the path of preparation, the first 2 being heat and peak. And these 5 powers are associated with the heat and peak level. Of course, can also arise on other levels, but here mainly described from this point of view, because they control the clear realization of the truth. So in that you've thoroughly trained your mind, you've now brought together realization of emptiness and calm abiding, and you're moving closer towards realizing emptiness directly. Okay. Here they're explained then are 5 folds of faith that believes in the truth, faith that believes in the direct experience of emptiness, which hasn't taken place yet. So at least we believe that this is possible, or that there is this direct experience, although we don't have it yet. Efforts that delights in averting what is to be averted and adopting what is to be adopted. Of course, that's extremely important. Mindfulness and so forth. So concentration, wisdom, but they're these enhanced versions, and they're described in the form of these 5 powers. Specifically important here in this context of moving the mind or helping the mind to directly realize emptiness, which hasn't happened yet. And then there are the 5 strength. So the strengthened version of the 5 powers, and I explained the difference between them before. Again, consists of faith and effort and mindfulness and so forth, as explained before. And now the 5 strength, they're explained from the point of view of being on the last 2 levels of the path of preparation, which is Suba, forbearance, and supreme Dharma. Okay, all right, then we can go further down, scroll to the next page. I think that's all that's been said. And then the differences given between them. Well, these 5 strengths are like a master that controls the clear realization of the truth. So there's more of a control. Of course, the direct realization hasn't taken place, but there's much more control. And the difference being that while one is meditating on the 5 strengths, one undermines the manifestation of non-faith, laziness, forgetfulness, distraction, and disorder discernment. Therefore, even during the subsequent time, when it's no longer meditating, non-faith, here says, will hardly ever arise. but usually it's like they don't arise really. So hardly, well, maybe hardly ever arise. Whereas, well, when the person had just attained the powers, the 5 powers, well, they would still arise during the subsequent period. Okay. All right. So that is when emptiness has not been directly realized yet. And then on the next level, there's the direct realization of emptiness. So once a bodhisattva, in this case, realizes emptiness directly, they attain the 7 elements of enlightenment. So it's a path consciousness and a continuum of an Arya. So we've realized emptiness directly. That is a cause of its result, enlightenment. And that refers to the path of seeing. So mindfulness, discernment of phenomena, again, effort, joy. Joy wasn't mentioned before, but now joy has become. So these are very similar qualities. They're just from the point of view of their strength, their abilities, they change. I mean, we give the same name to them. We call them mindfulness because of a basic. So also going back to emptiness, of course, we apply this name mindfulness, and we don't just describe it as mindfulness, but the element of enlightenment, that is mindfulness. So it's a form of mindfulness. Previously, we have mindfulness as part of the 4 applications. It was also mindfulness, but in terms of its strength and in terms of its ability, it slightly differs. So we can see that its defining characteristics, basic defining characteristics, are still the same. So we can still call it mindfulness, but a new aspect has arisen. Now this kind of mindfulness is a mental function, a function of a mind that realizes emptiness directly now. Whereas previously, the mindfulness that was described previously, it wasn't able to do that. And I said before, the way the 37 practices to enlightenment are described from the point in the Nalanda tradition. They're described here from the point of view of a bodhisattva, showing that a bodhisattva has to go through the practices that also a hero has to go through. A hero would have to go through them too. But in this tradition, the focus is more on bodhisattvas. And bodhisattvas have to do the same practices. They have to go through the same practices as a hero has to go through. And they're quite similar, these qualities, but they get strengthened. They get strengthened, and based on their strength, on their capability, like capacity and so forth, we call them now no longer application of mindfulness, I don't know, for abandonments and so forth, but instead we call them the element of enlightenment, that is mindfulness. Okay, or one of the 5 powers. We no longer call them one of the 5 powers, 5 strength, that also has the element of mindfulness or the mental factor, but instead they're now the 7 elements of enlightenment. Okay, so just to remind us, why do we talk about them? Because we want to understand their defining characteristics, and to understand that these defining characteristics plus these awarenesses themselves, they're merely labeled, because we're still talking about the emptiness of those. Okay, so what does it say here? The 7 elements. So the explanation of the powers and strength is followed by an explanation of the path that a clear realization of the truth. They're the actual realization of the truth. So previously it was just empowering them, gaining power over them, that is moving closer towards the actual clear realizations. But here they have been attained, and the 7 elements of enlightenment, that's what they're called here, although the person is not enlightened yet. But now with the direct realization of emptiness, we're actually removing that which is in the way to enlightenment. Previously, it didn't happen. Unless we realize emptiness, we're not starting to remove anything on our mind that is in the way to become enlightened. So here, the 7 elements of enlightenment, not saying that you reach enlightenment, but now the element to enlightenment is really attained. In that you've attained the antidote, the actual antidote to the obstructions to enlightenment. And the reason for the sequence is that the path that directly see the truth and the nature of the elements of enlightenment arise after realizing and attaining the path of the heat level, etc., that are in the nature of the powers and the strength. There's this bracket there, shouldn't be there, so it should just be the powers and the strength. Then it explains the mindfulness, okay, observing the truth without distraction, okay, keeping focused, remembering, focusing on the distraction. Discernment of phenomena. So it's the mental function of mindfulness that keeps it on the object. Discernment of phenomena that is an element of nature, newly and directly realizing selflessness. Effort, an element of definite release. Joy, that is a beneficial element benefiting body and mind. Pliancy, and so forth. So you can read through those. So with the element of enlightenment, that is right mindfulness, one observes true sufferings, after which one seeks to be free. So here they're just explained, and I don't think I need to go through them, just explaining them from the point of view of the Four Noble Truths, because of course, to remember, any teaching is part of the Four Noble Truths. Any explanation, any philosophical concept in Buddhism, any concept, in any Buddhist concept, it relates in one way or another to the Four Noble Truths. So there's nothing within Buddhism, nothing within reality, let's put it that way, that does not exist in the framework of the Four Noble Truths. So whether you talk about samsara, that's part of the first true truth. If you talk about nirvana or enlightenment, that's part of the last true truth. So not just Buddhism itself, everything that exists within the framework of the Four Noble Truths. And so here we're reminded of that again, of course, how even the elements, that is right, mindfulness and so forth, are also explained from that perspective. So that's what Geshe tells us. All right. So then thereby one observes the Four Noble Truths by means of the elements of enlightenment, which is why we should understand that these 7 factors are causes accomplishing the respective enlightenment of beings who are endowed with the hero lineage and so forth. So enlightenment, we think of enlightenment usually as the enlightenment of a Buddha, which is the way it is usually used. For instance, the Tibetan term for the mind of enlightenment is Changchup Ki Sem. Changchup is enlightenment, Sem is mind, and Gi is the genitive. So it's not enlightenment of, it's not really mind of enlightenment, it's enlightenment of mind. It's just how in Tibetan is just the other way around when they use the genitive. But it's literally enlightenment like the enlightenment of a Buddha. But sometimes the word enlightenment, Changchup, can also be used to describe the result of a hera. So the hera enlightenment, the solitary realizer enlightenment. And then to differentiate it between the enlightenment of a Buddha, you add the word great enlightenment. So when the word great enlightenment is used, depending on the context, you know, oh, they're talking about enlightenment from the point of view of the hera state. It's also called an enlightenment in that. So liberation is sometimes described as enlightenment. And great enlightenment, then it's obvious it's what we usually call enlightenment. So these 7 factors are causes accomplishing the respective enlightenment of beings with the hero lineage, solitary realizer lineage, and bodhisattva lineage. So those beings aiming towards their respective goal. But here they're mainly meditated on by bodhisattvas. Okay. And then you have the 8 elements of an Arya path. Okay, so what is noble? The noble eightfold path. The Tibetan, the English word noble, it's just, we got so used to it saying noble, is really Arya. It's saying like a noble being, an Arya being. Well, it's definitely rises in the continuum of a person who's an Arya, at least in the way it's explained here. In other traditions, or sometimes in other contexts, it's explained differently. But yeah, and we're familiar with this, the right view, right intention, right speech, right action, livelihood, and so forth. So let's see what Geshe tells us about the Noble Eightfold Path, or the 8 elements of the Arya path, as is translated here. So this is now from the point of view of the path of meditation, having realized emptiness directly. Now these qualities, certain qualities, mindfulness and so forth, still being part of these, well, certain mental functions, they're now given a different name based on their certain, well, specific defining characteristics that have slightly changed. So it's still mindfulness as part of the right mindfulness. However, now it's described as, well, right mindfulness for that matter, and as one of the elements of an Arya path. So what are the 8 elements? Right view, that during the period of subsequent attainment, thoroughly analyzes the suchness that was previously realized directly, which means once you realize emptiness directly, that is described as the period of meditative equipoise. The mind that realizes emptiness directly is described or is called a meditative equipoise. But you can't remain in that state all the time. You arise from it, and during that time, that time when you've arisen from it, that's called the subsequent attainment. So attaining a mind that is attained subsequent to the meditative equipoise. And at that time, right view here, as it's described, it kind of conceptually goes over suchness again. Even though you've directly realized it, but why you're not directly realizing it while you're doing other things, you conceptually realize it. It doesn't mean just because you can realize it directly, you no longer realize it conceptually. Then there's right intention that motivates speech, which teaches what one has realized to others. So this aspect of right intention, in particular here with regard to the intention to benefit others, teaching through one's example, but also through teaching through one's words. Pure speech, verbal action, which teaches what one has realized to others. So here, this is more emphasized on the path of meditation. Right action, that is a path facilitating a pure physical action, such as giving up, killing, and so forth. Pure in the sense that this is coming from the conviction from having realized emptiness directly. And so it's a different type of giving up, killing, for instance. Right livelihood, pure physical and verbal action, such as giving up hypocrisy, flattery, and so forth. It's explained slightly differently to the right livelihood that is usually, that oftentimes the Noble Eightfold Path is explained as. So whereas it's in a different context. Here's from the context of a bodhisattva, of course, on the path of meditation. Right exertion, cultivating the antidotes. There are still more antidotes that need to be cultivated, because a person on the path of meditation is not yet a Buddha. And right mindfulness is let's not forget the attributes of calm abiding, right perception, equanimity, and so forth. So concentration, there's still room for improvement. And then right concentration itself meditates in order to accomplish special qualities such as clairvoyance and so forth. So although some of them have already been attained, but basically really Buddhist practice, I mean, the becoming a Buddha is of utilizing mental qualities, mental functions that on a basic level we all have, and deepening them, strengthening them. So why are they strengthened? Because we realize emptiness at some point directly, and we start removing that which is in the way to bring these qualities to the fullest. So in the meantime, they're all strengthened. Okay. And the 8 elements, they can also be kind of condensed into thoroughly analysis, element that creates understanding, element that creates belief, element that is the antidote to opposing factors. Oh yeah, and then of course it can be condensed into 3 trainings: training and concentration in ethics and concentration, and the training in wisdom. So this is how the Noble Eightfold Path can also be divided. Okay, all right, so that was pretty quick. Yeah, my apologies. I hope I didn't, you weren't too bored with me giving this explanation. But anyway, if you've never had the chance to study the 4th chapter of the Abhisamaya Alamkara, which is one of the more difficult and more important chapters, well, at least you have a sense of those 37, and hopefully when His Holiness mentions them next time, His Holiness mentions them again and again, very often, sometimes at least he quotes them, he lists them. You have some understanding what they refer to. And that is superficial, yes, but we also need to know them in order to go back now to the text. Okay, so what does Chandrakirti tell us? And that's what I would like you to also do, the meditation on now the emptiness of those, to briefly go through them, that those are just all, those are qualities, are well, there are more qualities than those, but those definitely have to be there in a more enhanced version, and even more enhanced version, yes. But basically, it depends on these defining characteristics that they all have. Well, they lack inherent existence. We can say that they're merely labeled. So they're merely labeled. They don't have any inherent existence, no existence from their own side. So to understand that emptiness better, understanding that they're merely labeled, we need to understand label on the basis of what. So based on their defining characteristics, they're labeled. And even these defining characteristics, which really what Chandrakirti here is saying, he's describing these 37 aspects from the point of view of their defining characteristics, based on which these are labeled, and saying that even the defining characteristics, they lack inherent existence. So really it's another way of saying the basis of imputation of these 37 factors to enlightenment also lacks inherent existence. So their defining characteristics, they also lack inherent existence. Okay, so let me just find the part in the text. Verse 208, the 37 factors to enlightenment, or 37 factors lead to enlightenment. Their nature is to decisively drive forth from samsara. That's the defining characteristic of all 7 that is given here. These are qualities we all need if we want to be decisively overcome samsara. And since a hero overcomes samsara and a bodhisattva does too, they share these qualities. Okay, that should be enough. And next time we go back to Chandrakirti's text. All right, now it's time to briefly reflect on what I went through, what we went through, what we discussed today. Okay. I'll take a moment to let go of any exhaustion, of any confusion, possibly. Just let it go. And apply mindfulness to focus the mind on the breath, calm the mind, and to focus it on the breath. Now, what does Chandrakirti teach us? Regarding the emptiness of the defining factors of the defining characteristics of the 37 factors to enlightenment. So Chandrakirti says their defining characteristic, the defining characteristic of the 37 factors is to decisively drive forth from samsara. And that defining characteristic, to decisively drive forth from samsara lacks inherent existence. It is merely labeled. On the basis of its parts, on the basis of these different moments in time of advancing a person towards liberation. So based on these different factors, on those different levels, path of accumulation, path of preparation, all the way up to the path of meditation, we label a decisive driving forth to samsara. Without that defining characteristic, existing beyond being merely labeled. Just as these 37 factors themselves are merely labeled. For applications, mindfulness, are merely labeled in relation to a certain function of the mind, its object, how it gets at its object. Dependence on those, we designate application of mindfulness to the body and so forth. And likewise, for right abandonments. Dependence on joyous effort, which consists of moments that abandon a non-virtue that has arisen, that is recognizing that it's there, applying the antidote, keeping the antidote going until the non-virtue is gone, and checking whether it's gone. Based on all these moments, we label right abandonment that abandons a non-virtue that has arisen. It's a continuum of awareness within which the main function is joyous effort. Based on those, it's just labeled. And then there are the 4 supports of miraculous abilities. So dependence on the mental function of concentration, which is connected to what are called the 8 formatives. And that is described or has the quality of aspiration. We label support of miraculous abilities, that is aspiration. With different moments of awareness, forming a continuum, which only in the form of its continuum forms the function of this particular mind. Without these individual moments qualifying to be a support of miraculous ability. And then there are the 5 powers. Which are based on a union of calm abiding and special insight. And certain mental functions described as power that is faith, that is effort, and so forth. And when those grow even stronger, the function of faith, effort, that is those moments of awareness that as a continuum function as faith, effort, and so forth. Talk of the strength, five strength. Without being able to find five strength that exists beyond being merely labeled. And then in the continuum of a person who's realized emptiness directly has reached the path of seeing. Different moments of awareness that together perform the function of mindfulness. The basis of these moments of awareness we label element of enlightenment, of mindfulness. And so forth. And again, if we search for the elements of enlightenment among the moments of awareness that they consist of, we won't find it. We won't find them. And then lastly, there are the 8 elements of an Arya path, or as it's also described, the Noble Eightfold Path. Which is like the other 31 factors. Each individually merely labeled on the basis of a continuum of moments that all together perform a certain function. A function based on a mind that has realized emptiness directly. And has eliminated intellectually acquired obstructions to enlightenment. So, to summarize, all these mental qualities, none of them can be found to exist from their own side. It's the coming together of endless moments of awareness that, when they arise in the form of a continuum, perform certain functions, perceive something specific, or even eliminate obstructions to the mind. Based on those, they're merely labeled. As existing intrinsically or beyond being just designated, just labeled. So, to conclude this short analysis, whatever insights you've reached, whatever feeling has arisen, in combination with that insight, focus on that for a few moments, single-pointedly. So that your insight affects you on a deeper level. And then let's dedicate whatever positive potential we've accumulated, meditating on the emptiness of 37 factors to enlightenment and their defining characteristic. May they become a cause for us to cultivate those 37 ourselves. In combination with bodhicitta, so that they eventually lead us towards the enlightened state of a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. But in order to be able to accomplish this effectively, we need our spiritual masters, our lamas. So therefore, let's dedicate all our positive potential towards the long and healthy life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all the other great lamas. And may our virtue also cause those who are sick to soon recover, like Geshe Punsok, Tali Lubin, Norit Cohen, and everyone else who's physically sick or suffers from mental illness. And may our virtue cause the war in the Ukraine and any other armed conflict to be over soon. May it cause those who are responsible for any conflict to overcome their greed and instead generate love and compassion and wisdom. To stop their harmful actions. And then let's also dedicate, as Shantideva does, the words of Shantideva. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm a little late. Went a little bit longer than usual, but please remember what's to do for this coming week. You know, it's bodhicitta. We're focusing now. Finally, we got to the Mind of Enlightenment. And well, before we continue with, again, other meditations, we'll do Donglen at some point. But for this week, it's bodhicitta, bodhicitta, bodhicitta. All right, so the instructions are easy, but yeah, to deepen our meditation on that. All right, so have a great week. And next week, we'll continue with the text. There should be enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a lovely
Geshe-ma.
week.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you, Geshe-ma.
Good night.
Thank you, Dharma friend.